This is the zoning subcommittee meeting for April 8th, 2019. Madam Clerk?
Roll call the members of the zoning subcommittee. Councilor Janino is absent. Councilor Keefe?
Here.
Here. Councilor Novoselsky? Here. Councilor Rizzo is absent. Ex officio member, Council President Guanasso?
Here.
Here. And Chairman Zambudo?
Here.
Here. Quorum is present. First item on the agenda is the proposed moratorium for rooming and lodging houses.
This is Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know this has been pending for a while, and I guess you were waiting to hear from our city solicitor on this, and I believe, it's something that we want to prepare for the ordinance for Airbnbs, and it's going to give us 9 months to do this, and we won't give out any rooming house or lodging house licenses until we can put that together. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to this. They want us to have a chance to put something together and give us time to do it so nobody else will come in and over these 9 months, and hopefully we can do this over the next 9 months, if not before. So that's where I stand right now, Mr. President. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors want to speak on this item? Councilor Patch, welcome. Glad to see you, my friend. Anyone else? Can we hear from the city solicitor? I didn't want to offer any false information. I wanted to have you speak before I did.
Sure. Members of the committee, Paul Capizzi, city solicitor. As I understand it, I was asked to explain whether or not short-term rental would include rooming houses, lodging houses, boarding houses. Is that my understanding?
The idea was to, depending on what we put in the ordinance, if we only limit it to buildings of 4 units, then they're not an issue. They can't do it. So that's when I guess the chairman asked you to come up to explain that. But, I didn't want, because I got word that some of the rooming houses and lodging houses that exist are looking to utilize Airbnb in some of their, not necessarily all the rooms, but some of the rooms. So, I'm just looking to restrict it to not to go into those, and maybe within the ordinances that we built, that we put together, that we limit it to X amount of units on a piece of property.
I will tell you this, that we're still in the process of drafting it with some members actually of this committee that are sitting with myself in the mayor's office putting this together. And as it's drafted right now, though this is not the final draft, a short-term rental, what you're calling Airbnb, would not include a hotel, a motel, a licensed rooming house or lodging house, or a licensed bed and breakfast. Those are completely separate things that we license separately. So a lodging house or a rooming house could not become a short-term rental. They already are kind of short-term rentals, so it doesn't make sense. The short-term rental, as I understand it, is if your own property, your own apartment, your own home, your own condo, you want to rent it short-term while you're away. That's very different and distinct from a rooming house or a lodging house. But again, this is just a draft, and you folks will all get to see it before you consider it for passage.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the whole idea is, right now, those rooming houses and lodging houses can put in an Airbnb.
But
there's no regulations.
But they're already being rented as rooms. How do you then rent it as a short-term rental? I don't understand that. I'm missing something here in the
rooming houses. The rooming houses, when you say short-term, are not really short-term, because there are rooming houses, 3 of them in my area. One has a lodging license by continuation of a non-conforming use as grandfathered in. But the other 2, the people living there 365 days a year, they don't move. They stay there. So they're really not short-term.
That's correct. But I mean, are you saying that people that live there are then renting it as a short-term rental?
They could. And the owner could.
Right. Well, under the units as drafted, that would not be permitted.
Right, and I understand that, but this 9-month moratorium would stop anybody in the lodging world, because like I said, right now, they could do it if they wanted to, because there's no regulation for it. And I want to give us time to put this new ordinance together so nobody can do it now in those buildings. And that's the reason for this.
Understood.
Is that within reason to do this and to proceed with this?
Sure. What, proceed with the short-term rental ordinance?
With the 9-month moratorium.
Look into the moratorium in and of itself. I'm only telling you that I'm only here to talk about the short-term rental ordinance as we're drafting, what we're considering to put into that ordinance. I didn't consider that or prepare for it.
Okay, so let me interrupt here for a second. So am I to understand that there's so much flexibility in a rooming house license that you don't have to go by certain rules and regulations by the license? Isn't there restrictions in a rooming house license that says that you can't?
Well,
It just seems bizarre to me that.
I don't think I'm not
I don't
understanding
know
what's
how that could
happening.
be a problem. I just don't believe that would ever be a problem, but maybe I'm naive. I guess, you know,
If I understand Councilor Novoselsky, what he's telling me is that the person who rents the room in the rooming house and maybe rents it year-round, or lives there essentially, could then rent it, sublet it, for lack of a better term, as a short-term rental when they're not there.
most of these places I don't think are that desirable, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess I don't want to disparage anybody. I guess I'm going to leave
Mr.
that.
Chairman,
I'm going to leave that alone.
The buildings we have, the three we have are in excellent condition.
Oh, really?
They're in excellent, they're not bed bug
Okay.
heaven. It's,
I think before we go forward with this moratorium, I'm going to want a lot more information, some from you, as to what restrictions are. Maybe we need to go to the License Commission. I want to know what is what and what is actually real that could happen. And I've never been fond of moratoriums. I don't want to mislead anybody, let anybody think that I've all of a sudden jumped on a moratorium bandwagon. I don't think I've ever supported any moratoriums. But if I can be convinced that it's really needed, then I'll support it, obviously.
I mean, I have no idea, and maybe Ira knows a lot more about this. I don't think the License Commission is aware of this, or that anyone is aware that rooming houses are now also being used as short-term rental. They do have their own rules and regulations that the License Commission applies to the license for the rooming houses. We can find out from the License Commission what those are, of course.
Yeah, I definitely want some more information. Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we do, and very shortly, through the efforts of a couple of councilors on the City Council and the Council of the Whole, by the way, are working very handedly to present to the Committee of the Whole a package in terms of short-term rentals. And I think within that provision, they've already met some of the criteria that would prohibit such a thing. But I think in the short-term rentals, in terms of a rooming house, I think there are certain things that you need in the short term. You need a private individual bath. I don't think you can have a common shared bathroom. I think you need, so there's certain provisions that require different attention. So I don't think that that's going to come into being also. But I know that very shortly this council will be preparing and seeing a presentation from a couple of councilors in reference, it's mostly Councilor Giannino and Councilor McKenna, Councilor Keefe, rather, with the short-term rentals, that the Legislative Affairs is going to come in and give us a package that we think that would be a valid one, and we'd supersede any other city in town, because what we've done is, and this is only through conversation that I hear from the council, is that we've gotten input from different towns and cities, and I think we're going to put forward a terrific package to help in this particular problem. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think once you speak with the chair for Legislative Affairs, he will tell you more the update on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council President, and I want to thank all of you that are involved in that committee. That's really good work you're doing, and it's very important work. Councilor Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much like Councilor Guanasso said, these are really, they are two separate types of ordinances or types of housing or home, rental units versus housing and short-term. But I think to Council Novoselsky and to Council Guanasso, some of these problems that you want to address are going to be resolved in the ordinance that we're going to be putting forth, I would say within the next 30 days. We're almost with our finishing draft to bring to the council, so that'll probably resolve most of your issues. I don't know if there's I would have no problem with putting a moratorium on rooming houses throughout the city. I think that we're pretty overburdened as it is. However, I don't know if necessarily the council is really in favor of approving any right now anyway. So if someone was to come to the council, I can't think of many areas where we would want these. So I think the council would probably end up voting them down regardless. But that's just my feeling. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Council Novoselsky.
I would, when I put this in, I was looking to protect the city and from all this, and I don't know why we keep hesitating from just putting it in, giving us the chance to do it, and giving us the 9 months. It doesn't have to go through the full 9 months. Once the new rules go into effect, this would be over, because they won't be able to do it. But on the other hand, let me say this, that the longer you keep it in here, there's kind of a moratorium going on now because nobody can pull a license to do a rooming house or a lodging house based on what we're doing right here because it's already in process. So if this committee released it, okay, it would be 9 months from when the council approved it. But if you kept it in committee, now what's happening is there is kind of a moratorium because nobody can pull licenses for it. I don't know if the solicitor could confirm or deny that, but right now something's already in the process and nobody can do anything while things are in process. So, and I don't know how long we can keep it in committee. It's 60 days, 90 days. So maybe by that time, the ordinance will come out and it'll be a moot point.
I think at that point, if we're still not ready to pass that ordinance, then we consider it, and that's after I've got the rest of the information that I'm looking for. So, yeah, I think that's fine. So we'll just leave this in committee. Next order of business, please.
Next item on the agenda is James George on behalf of AT&T Wireless to install small cell wireless equipment on an existing National Grid wood utility pole at the corner of 116 State Road and 4 Unity Ave.
Mr. George.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Ladies and gentlemen of the subcommittee, for the record, Jim George. I'm representing Extenet and AT&T Wireless for a small cell special permit application for the wood utility pole at 116 State Road. I wanted to take a moment, and I'd like to get into a cadence of 3 or 4 minutes. There was concern about radio frequency emissions, and over the past 20 years, I have stood next to or sat next to very bright people. And everybody has a way of trying to explain this to people. I've developed a way, very short, and try to be specific to the questions that the body asked last time. So 3 or 4 minutes. And then I will address the specific reports of compliance. I have submitted the material to the body. Radio frequency. One question that was asked is, I think this goes to the standard that the FCC has developed since way back in 1996 when I was building cell towers. They developed a standard that they called it a bright red line. That standard, as the Gs have developed, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, has been continually looked at in their federal reporting. So there was discussion about that not being looked at a lot. It's looked at annually. Specifically, there are some good statements in this particular report in the last reassessment that they did of the exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, limits, and policies, dated 2013. This report I'm going to quote from, and I think it hits the mark on a lot of the questions that this body has. Directly from the report, I'll do this 2 or 3 times, but I really think it hits the mark, because I don't like to get technical with the stuff, because I'm not qualified for that. The intent of the Commission's exposure limits is to provide a cap that both protects the public based on scientific consensus and allows for efficient and practical implementation of the wireless services. They call this a bright red line rule. That's the actual term they use. Bright red line about FCC standard, about what all these people got together and they realized what would be the standard for acceptable MPE in wireless. The Commission's current RF exposure guidelines are an example of intense regulation, including including a significant, what they called a safety factor, whereby the exposure limits are set at a level on the order of 50 times below the level at which adverse biological effects have been observed in laboratory animals as a result of tissue heating resulting in RF exposure. So they set a level, they called another safety factor in, and they reduced that level to 50%. There isn't any application that I have seen in my 20 years that has come anywhere near that 50%. 5%, 6%, 5% is pretty much the basic that any macro situation would have if you're right up against the antenna. The theory also, and this is important, the further you get from the antenna, the radon, the less effect it has. So this particular report and most reports give you a reading right at the antenna, and then they back themselves up all the way to the street. So with that said, that's how that standard was developed. It was developed in conjunction with several different organizations. The World Health Organization. Now, if you Google around, a lot of people come up with World Health Organization. Has concluded on its review that all available studies have concluded that there is no convincing scientific evidence that the weak RF signals from base stations and wireless networks cause adverse health effects. Another agency involved with this dialogue is the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, has determined and based on all available evidence that there is no increased health risk due to radiofrequency energy. National Cancer Institute, despite the rise in cell phone use, brain cancer rates did not increase between 1987 and 2005. The society today uses their cell phones. They are transient in the sense that it is difficult to come up with an all-encompassing worldview about how this radiation affects everybody. You're walking down the street, you're sleeping in a bed, you get up and go to work, you drive in your car. You are constantly engaged in a bubble of radio frequency emissions depending on where you are at any given time of the day. Every person is in a different place at any given time of the day. That's why it's somewhat difficult to pin this stuff down. And there's a lot of dialogue about how to pin it down. Well, when you put a rat in a cage and you beam him up, that's pinning him down. When you are transient, that's more difficult to do. Specifically to the application of 116 State Road. The FCC, the radio frequency compliant EME study, specific to this particular poll, uses a worst case scenario. They have a software that is developed through the industry, radio frequency engineers, that develops a worst case scenario, which means they put it right up, the model itself is based on the spec sheet of the antenna used and the dynamic of height and the spec sheet. They produce their model. That model produces a number based on the specs and the distance between the worst case, which is right next to it. They then distance it out. The worst case scenario for this particular small cell, which is a small cell antenna, low power, is at a level of 0.238% of the FCC's occupational limit and 1.19 of the FCC's general population limit. Those percentages are against 100% and are well beneath the 50% plateau and the safety margin that was developed. I have a high degree of confidence based on these reports. I've seen thousands of these things in macro and now with small cell, that this particular small cell is compliant based on the specific report and is safe and will not emit radio frequency emissions that will make anybody sick. The level by which the nearest building to this is 11 feet. It's basically at the corner of that intersection. State and Unity go up. 11 feet takes it from the sidewalk to the edge of that building, and then it goes beyond that. These are low power, and I say they emit less than 1,000 feet, 3 city blocks, 2-minute walk. They piff. The reason why they're in Ward 1, this particular one is there for a reason. Back when I was up at T-Mobile doing a project, a new build, I was up on that hill. And I tried to find roofs, I tried to find all kinds of things to put this on. We didn't want to make a deal with the MBTA, and it all fell apart. I know that you don't have any coverage up there from anybody. T-Mobile, AT&T, nobody. It's the dynamic of the topography, and the reason why I can't build a tower because of the flight zone. I can't build a tower up there. There's nothing tall. The notion of small cell is you've got AT&T in their towers and their rooftops around the city. That part of Ward 1 is topography, the topo is challenging, and there is not a telecommunications facility macro going into it that isn't already fizzled out. The notion of small cell, and there's a ton of these happening, is to stick themselves in the center, what a radio frequency engineer says, I need that here, and to give you that side of the hill. As the signal goes up the hill, the signal becomes less effective. So they're going to have to go on the other side of the hill and do another one. So I think that this particular one will give that area of Ward 1 good coverage. It'll go from half a bar to 3 bars, and you'll be able to download your bandwidth. The need for bandwidth in the United States is without question insatiable. We have to keep driving forward through government regulations and getting this thing done, and the way that they're spending their money is on these small cells. I remember the pivot from towers, you got to go something smaller, no more towers. I get that. So they're going with these small cells. Every 500-600 feet. They're going to propagate these 0.25% of what they're allowed, and they're just going to engage bandwidth into that general area. They target the areas that don't have it. You're not going to see one of these go directly within a block of an existing macro site of AT&T. You'll see them on, it's not even outskirts, it's based on topography and what this thing is banging into. You'll see them in the dense areas of the city, the dense residential, the schools, outside the schools, because they've determined that the need for that particular place is sucking the existing macro need, the propagation is happening, and they need to just put a puff and blast in that school or around that campus. To illustrate that, I'm doing a lot around college campuses, Babson, Northeastern, UMass. You've got a college campus, they've got a tower over there, 1, 2, 3, 4, around the campus, bang, 3 blocks in, that campus is lit up. So that's the notion behind the small cell. So to wrap this up, the application itself of 116 State Road is compliant to your application procedures. I have both licenses, so I have land control. I have a right-of-way agreement with the jurisdiction, so I have land control and easement control. I've got both license, and I've got a compliant radio frequency EME report, which completes the requirements of the application. I'm hopeful that my explanation at least gave you a little bit more guidance on how the standards are applied, and I feel they're safe. Somebody said, use the word safe a lot. They are safe for the general public. Thank you very much. I'll answer questions if you have them.
I'm going to go to the ward council first in kind of a breaking of our tradition of going to the committee members first, but Council McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James, respectfully, I totally disagree with everything you're saying. I'm sorry. First of all, when cigarettes came out, no one knew that they would cause cancer, okay? Years later, they find out that the cigarettes cause cancer. You're saying that there were studies done 1987 to 2005 that these cells don't create any kind of cancer or anything. The thing is that that's 2005, that's 13 years ago. We've increased in technology. I do believe that believe that these cells cause cancer. I've read a lot of stuff on the internet, and as my chairman says, where's the proof? Let's see the proof, let's see the proof. And it's just document after document after document after document that these cells do cause cancer. One of the documents I read, and I read it a while ago, and it was just on the news that they just removed a cell tower from that was on a school site property. 4 children came down with cancer, and a doctor said that a certain cancer that they had was set by radiation. So I am so against this, I really am. I don't have cell phone service in my house, like I told you. I have no I have to stand in the middle of the room. Everybody always says, what? Can't hear you, what? Can't hear you. I would love this, but I am not gonna put it near a house, which I'm very concerned about, 4 Unity Ave. You say 4 Unity Ave, they've got the address wrong, but what I know of 4 Unity Ave is right in front of someone's house. And I don't want a cell phone, I wouldn't want a cell phone tower or an antenna in front of my house. So I'm totally against 4 Unity Ave. If you want to put it across the street from, I don't think we have a say anyways. I think we have to vote on this. And we have to vote yes, or there could be a lawsuit or whatever, but I am totally against 4 Unity Ave, and I'll say no to this. If you want to put it on State Road in front of the Beachmont train station, that's fine. You also said that the further away from the antenna, the less radiation it causes. So you're going to put an antenna on 4 Unity Ave, and you were saying it's right in front of Columbian Restaurant, but that's State Road. And if you go up the hill, that's 4 Unity Ave. So if you're going to put it in front of someone's house, I'm totally against this, totally. And I'm sorry, respectfully, I don't agree with anything you're saying. I'm sorry. I believe that these cell antennas give off microwave radiation, depending on if it's this big or this big, I don't know. I even called my brother, who's an inventor. He has 23 patents. He worked for Analogic Computers, Analogic and Peabody, and he called a scientist, but a scientist couldn't give him any information because it's all brand new. It's all brand new. But what's going to happen in 10 years from now is we're going to find out that these cell towers are extremely dangerous, and they're causing massive cancer and massive, illnesses. So I am totally against this. If I have to vote for it, I'm not going to anyways, but I'm not going to vote for it, but I will not put it in front of a residential house. A residential property. I will not. So, thank you.
Thank you, Council McKenna. Council President Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur fully with Councilor McKenna, based on the fact that I did see the report and watch the TV presentation that was given on the news in reference to Weston, Massachusetts. It's a town of Weston that it clearly spelled out that these children did get cancer, and previously they have no history at all of any children getting cancer in that particular area. And so that's just one little thought that has in mind. But what I've done, sir, and to my colleagues, I've got some research here through different types of information that I want to forward over to the City Council and to you, Mr. Chairman. But the first one is, how do you oppose 5G cell towers? Very clearly, there's case law in California where the town of Hillsborough, California, denied application of 16 tower requests, and it was upheld by the courts, and also was upheld by the state of California's governor, Governor Jerry Brown. So that's the only thing I disagree with Councilor McKenna is that we have to vote for it. We know we don't have to vote for that. And that's what litigation's all about. We have a difference of an opinion. We share our valued opinion. We represent people that we're trying to protect. And we are not scientists. We might bring this to another level where people who are more qualified and versed on it to speak on it. But the more you educate yourself on something, the more you see the validity of what you're talking about in opposition. And these documents, Mr. Chairman, will help your committee and yourself make a conscientious effort to come up with a fair decision based on what you know. And Councilor McKenna, you said it very, very nicely and very, very briefly. And years back, the health industry was saying it's okay to smoke. Now, all of a sudden, we know differently. And for the past several years, we've known differently. And we've known the lives that we've damaged throughout all those years. I was a smoker. As soon as I was told about the facts of what was going on with me, I stopped right on the spot. That was in 1967. Never to pick up another cigarette again, because it was so injurious to my health. If I wanted to get my gums cut out, I'd keep smoking. If I wanted to do nothing, stop smoking. Very simple. So people should be made aware of the cell problem that we have. And I have a cell phone, so I do depend on transmission from the cell tower. But I think 5G oversteps that. And I probably have a 5G phone here, and it's probably radiating right now as I speak. But and it's true. And you come up and you're stating these things, but we're trying to protect a little small communities called Revere. We're trying to protect our inhabitants. We're trying to make it as health safety as possible. So, Mr. Chairman, rather than belabor this, I ask that I submit this to you and your committee, and that we review what the contents of this is, if it has any validity at all. I find it to be so interesting and worthy of contention that we should, on the basis of this information, and I'm not speaking for any other council, you can vote however you think is right. I am voting no, based on the fact of what I've received here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council President, for doing the research, and I appreciate it because you're the first one. I asked our firefighters to submit some paperwork. I haven't received it yet. This gentleman submitted a report, and now you're the first person that's actually given me any documentation, which is how we're supposed to work up here, is that we make informed decisions. You can't make informed decisions without all the information that's available. Councilor Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe, and not to contradict you, Mr. Chairman, but I do believe you were part of some emails that come from some concerned residents in opposition to this. But
Again, I hate to interrupt you.
Right.
I've received emails of people that are against it. Yes,
Correct.
I have. However,
There was
that
some
is not the type of information I'm looking for.
Correct.
I'm looking for scientific data.
Correct. Well, there was some articles that had,
Yeah,
data in there.
there's a lot of articles.
Correct.
I want documents so I can judge whether they're from pie-in-the-sky websites or they're actual documentation, like a report that this gentleman submitted. And, I'm going to keep this in committee, but I want everybody to understand, the longer we keep this in committee, it could just go forward without, I don't know how much time we have on this particular permit, but,
Mr. Chairman, my speech, I wasn't here to contradict you, like I said.
Okay, go
I do
ahead.
apologize. I just wanted to make sure that you make reference to, there was some communication and lack of support of this from some constituents. Also, like you had mentioned, there was a particular firefighter that, he had a stack of information. Again, I'm not sure if he submitted that or not. I wanted to make sure that, for the record, he had sent a letter to the council, which I had forwarded to Madam Clerk Melnick and yourself before the committee. And that was from Captain O'Hara.
again, and I appreciate that, but that is an email opposing the special permit.
So-
Not based in science and fact.
Correct.
What I want is documentation so that we can all make an informed decision.
Thank you. And I'm glad that, meeting with Council President Guanasso before the meeting, he had instructed me that he was bringing you some informed information, which I'm glad he did for us. Thank you. But what I wanted to, basically make my comments real brief. Sometimes there's topics that come up in front of the council and we feel very strongly about, and sometimes we are very knowledgeable about. I'm not a public health expert, and I don't want to pretend to be. I will never be a public health expert. So when those types of things come in front of us, I rely on some of my fellow councilors. Sometimes I rely on the experts. And it just, from my uneducated opinion, you have a good article, you have a bad article, you have good information, you have information against it. So the next thing I go towards is the people that I represent. And I can tell you that I have yet to receive one positive comment from a person that I represent. I've received dozens of calls and emails from people I do represent in opposition to this. So, I know that, I'm not sure if you're going to be going to vote. I would not be able to support this tonight. Thank you.
Counselor, who's up? Counselor Morabito, you have anything on this? No? Counselor Janino? No. Okay, so this is going to remain a committee for,
Can I rebut for 30
yeah,
seconds?
you certainly can.
All right, I feel
And it is going to remain a committee until our next council meeting.
What's the date of that meeting?
April 22nd.
Okay, just to rebut a couple of things very respectfully. The particular pole that we're talking about is directly at the corner of the commercial area. It's not in front of 4 Unity. So the photograph. If I could give this to Ashley, you could show the council the photograph. That particular pole is right at the corner. The 4 Unity is not directly abut. The the FCC on the radio frequency emissions, as I said, I'll say it again, it's constantly reviewed and updated in the sense of reassessing the problems and the needs and gathering of every radio frequency expert that they can get their hands on. The standing guideline in litigation, specifically for radio frequency, is Section 704 of the 1996 TCA. I feel the need to read the statement out loud, please. Respectfully, no state or local government or instrumentality, therefore, may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of environmental effects or radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. This particular report, specifically for this particular small cell, is .26 of the federally guidelined areas of EME. We must respect the federal guidelines. There's really, as a carrier, as a licensed carrier, in order to maintain our license, that is our pole. And I feel just as strongly as the body does that these are safe. I have one outside of my home, 158A Lafayette Street. I put it there. I argue with it, and I put it there. It's Sprint. It's 25 feet from my bedroom. I feel completely comfortable, if that means anything to anybody. On the timeline, the federal shot clock, 60 days. On April 22nd, you're approaching those 60 days. So what the government did is tighten the timeline up to at least address and advance the application especially based on radio frequency, if it gets into that dialogue. So it is 60 days, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next order of business, please.
Next special permit on the agenda is Thesis LLC, Barris Burke, 109 Eustis Street, seeking permission from the Revere City Council to allow the current daycare preschool use to be changed to a professional office use at 283 Cushman Ave.
Counselor?
Good evening, Councilors. Corey Rhodes with D'Ambrosio Brown LLP, 14 Proctor Avenue in Revere. We represent the petitioner, Thesis LLC, and its manager, Barris Burke. Somewhat of a straightforward proposal. This is the property at 283 Cushman, right across the street from the Wheeland School. There is a longstanding daycare use at this property. My client is under contract to purchase the property and would like to convert that daycare use to a real estate brokerage office. So it's a professional office special permit is what we're asking for, and a special permit for non-conforming use. There is no expansion of the building being proposed or added units or anything like that. It is strictly related to the use. We think this will be a much more beneficial use to the neighborhood, not having as much traffic with people dropping off and picking up kids. And this will be traditional working hours for this business, 9 to 6. There were some neighbors here at the last hearing that had some concerns about trees on the property. My client has met with them. As far as I understand, their concerns are going to be addressed after the closing, and they're not here tonight. I assume they're happy about that discussion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any councilors? Council Patch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corey, I'm sorry, I didn't get to meet with you before.
No problem.
And I haven't had any negative response to this. But I have one question.
Sure.
Employees parking.
There proposed to be maybe 3 employees going to be working out of the office. It's a new firm. There are, I believe, 7 parking spaces on the property. I think the way brokerage firms work, they're oftentimes out meeting with prospective buyers or sellers, and it really time back at the office is not, you don't have everybody there at the same time, I guess is a way to put it.
Okay, like I said, Mr. Chairman, I haven't received any people against this development, so I'm going to go for it. Okay.
Thank you, Council Patch. I mean, it certainly looks like a lesser of an offensive to the neighborhood as what was there. Council President?
Mr. Chairman, I also agree with Councilor Patch and yourself. My area is just feet away from the location. I have no objection. People haven't spoken to me in opposition to this. It certainly is a better use, I think, less inclusion of traffic coming to the site, and so I think it's a better use. So, and being aware of somewhat what they do in the real estate market, there's 1 or 2 cars, they go, they're not there for 8 hours a day, and so it's very lightly traveled. I think it's a good use. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council President. Any other councilors wish to speak on this? Okay, I believe the city clerk has some conditions to put on this.
These were conditions submitted by the Site Plan Review Committee. There's 3 of them. 1, the plans must be reviewed and approved for fire safety compliance by the fire department. 2, the construction plans must be reviewed and approved by the code consultant. And 3, pavement markings shall be used to appropriately mark the parking spaces for both the residential and office use.
I guess we'll have a vote of the committee.
Roll call on the special permit application, subject to the findings and conditions of site plan review. Councilor Janino? Yes. Councilor Keefe?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Novoselsky?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Rizzo is absent. Ex officio Guanasso?
Yes.
Yes. And Chairman Zambudo?
Yes.
Yes, the special permit will be forwarded to the full city council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting of the zoning subcommittee, and we will meet again April 22nd, probably at 5 o'clock, but we'll figure that out.